Daf Tes.
We are on Daf Tes Amud Aleph. We are learning today L'Zecher Nishmas, my mother, Maras Leah Bas Tzvi. Today is her yahrzeit. Give me a second. It's also the yahrzeit of my great-great-grandfather, my mother's great-grandfather, Moreinu Rav Rabbi Eliezer Rav Shlomo Doib Zucker, otherwise known by the name of his sefer, of his book, the Magdonos Eliezer, who was also nifter today. And he is buried in the city of Bereksaz, which today is in the Ukraine, but back in the day was in Hungary, in the Carpathian Mountains. So, here we go. All the neshamas of an aliyah, all Jews should have a Yeshuas, and Mashiach shall come already.
By the way, I'm supposed to get from that Amazon that piece today.
Let me take a look, everybody. Excuse me, Jeff.
No, it's okay.
Very important business over here. My father needs. It was a certain piece.
A bulb changer.
A bulb changer. All right, the bulb changing is arriving today by 10 p.m. I got to take this call. Hang on 1 second. Sal? Hi, good morning. Can I call you back? Because
a bulb changer is like one of those long that you...
Yeah, I will. Yeah.
You have high ceilings?
Today, so I'll probably call you from the road. Okay, very good.
The end piece was broken.
No, nothing at all. Everything all right? Right, very good. Okay, so very good. We're very good. Very good. I'll get you back. Yeah, Tess Amud Aleph.
That sounds like a good idea.
We're starting a new parak. You did it
Our
already?
ceilings are so tall. It's like if you have a light bulb that goes out, you need major scaffolding.
I'll WhatsApp you the link. You can come jump right on in if you want. I'm doing it right now. We're coming right now. I'm doing it right now. Hold on. Okay. Bye-bye. Give me a second. It's coming on WhatsApp. You got it. You got it. Very good. No, I have somebody coming in who didn't do the daf yet. Hang on a second. Daddy, where are you? Where's Daddy?
Yitzhak, you can really feel the difference in the energy in the room when you do it like at the shul.
I know. First of all, I'll tell you the other difference. It really, here we go. Okay. Here you go.
You said it's going to come at 10 p.m.?
What? By 10 p.m. Don't worry about it.
At night?
Yeah. In other words, they're giving themselves the whole day for it to come. That's the way it goes. Okay? You just got it. Very good. Here we go. Okay? We may have to restart it again if somebody jumps on. Okay? A friend of mine. Okay? Colleague. Here we go. So, here's our question. The rules of Nazir are that a person, it should be Makabel Nazirus, accepts upon himself what? He accepts upon himself not to drink wine, not to become contaminated to the dead, etc. What happens if his wording is wrong? Okay, here we go. Hareini Nazir.
Where did we leave off, Yitzhak?
Oh,
what page?
We are on page 9A1. I'm sorry about that.
The Mishnah?
The Mishnah, correct. Right? You're jumping right back in the perfect spot. Okay? Here we go. Hareini Nazir min hagroigros umin hadevela. A guy says, I am a Nazir. All great. And then he adds the words. From a dried figs or pressed figs. Geroigris is dried figs, Devalim are pressed figs. Okay? Beis Shammai says, Nazir. He becomes, because he said the words, Hareini Nazir, he said the words Hareini Nazir, he therefore becomes a Nazir. But even though he said the words from figs or pressed figs, which have nothing to do with Nazirus, nonetheless, says Shammai, it's Nazirus. Beis Hillel Oimrim, ain't Nazirus. It's not Nazirus. Not only is it not Nazirus, everybody, but it's not even a neder, a vow against eating figs. It's nothing. Since figs have to do nothing to do with Nazirus, and Nazirus has nothing to do with figs, says Beis Hillel, the whole thing is complete and utter nonsense. Throw it out. Nothing happened here. Beis Shammai says no. You said Hareini Nazir. If you had stopped there, you would have been a full-fledged Nazir. So guess what? You are a full-fledged Nazir. Okay? Good morning, David. How are you? I don't know if he's on or not. Oh, David went silent. Very good. Just give me a second. Good morning, Sal. How are you? Okay?
Good morning.
Good morning. A colleague of mine is joining us today. Okay, needs to doing the job. So again, I'm just going to start again. When you make a Kabbalah for Nazirus, you accept upon your Nazirus, you're taking upon yourself to forbid yourself from wine and its byproducts, and not to be mitama mace. Okay? And not to be mitama mace. Okay? Good morning, Sal.
Good morning.
Morning. Welcome to our share. So, but here he's messing up the words. He says Hareini Nazir. That's good. From dried figs or pressed figs, or in Yiddish, they would say, I love this because it was one of the words I learned, right? That's it. So, Beis Shammai Oimrim Nazir. Beis Shammai Oimrim Nazir. Okay, by the way, if I freeze, please let me know because it says my internet is a little weak. Anyways, Beis Shammai Oimrim Nazir. You are a Nazir. Nazirus has nothing to do with figs. It's got to do with wine. Doesn't matter. You said Hareini Nazir. Good enough. But what you didn't do, in no way did you forbid yourself to the figs. In no way do we consider your last words from dried figs or pressed figs to mean that I forbade myself. I made a neder against it. So Beis Shammai holds Nazir, it is a Nazir. Beis Hillel Oimrim, Eino Nazir. It's nothing. Nazirus has nothing to do with figs, and figs have nothing to do with Nazirus. So guess what? The wording is meaningless, out the door. Rabbi Yehuda, kommt Rabbi Yehuda, no. Beis Shammai, this that Beis Shammai says it's Nazirus, loy amru, ela ba'omer, only where he says, Harei hein alai carbon. They are like, to me, like a carbon. In other words, according to this, it's a neder, meaning that in fact, you know what he did? He made the figs like a carbon. He made the figs like a kodesh, like a sanctified carbon. So the figs become prohibited, but there is no Nazirus. Rabbi Yehuda is changing the words. He says, Beis Shammai Oimrim, Nazir. He doesn't mean Nazir, he means neder. That the wording actually comes to forbade the figs, but in Nazirus you didn't take on. So right away, the Gemara jumps all over this. Says the Gemara. Hareini Nazir min agroiris min adavela. Person says, been a Nazir from dried figs or pressed figs. Beis Shammai Oimrim Nazir. Frag the Gemara, why? V'amai mikol asher yaseh me'gefen hayayin yomer rachmana. The Torah says that Nazirus has only to do with wine and grape products, nothing to do with
Let's
figs.
go out for a minute to set
So
up
he
here.
made a comparison.
No, we have to go to
What
settings.
it called, right? He made a comparison of Greigeris of Naziris to Greigeris and the Velois, which have nothing to do with the bottom line halacha that Naziris is a wine prohibition, a grape prohibition, and for the Gemara, Beis Shammai Sabri like Rab Meir. Beis Shammai holds like Rab Meir. The Omar Ein Odam Moitzi Devarav Lebatola, that a person does not let words fall out of his mouth haphazardly. In other words, when a person thinks, we may have an assumption that he knows what he's saying. So in other words, you have two different cases here. One on the Nazirus and two on the Develos, on the figs. You see what I'm saying? In other words, if all your words mean something, then your first words for Hareini Nazir were for the Nazir. The stuff for the Greigeris and the Develos is a separate Nazir, is a separate thing. So if that's the case, so we're going to get to this. So according to this, therefore, the first words you said were Hareini Nazir, you became a Nazir. Your second words, which were a negative, that were compared to Nazirus, are meaningless because Nazirus has nothing to do with figs and figs have nothing to do with Nazirus. So the first part stands, says Beis Shammai. Beis Hill Sabri, Beis Hill holds Kid Rabbi Yosi. Beis Hill holds like Rabbi Yosi, the Omar, that says Gomar Devorav Adam Nitfas. The end of his words, a person is even by his concluding words. In other words, the Rosh says, you can find the Rosh, it's about 15 lines before it gets fat on the bottom. Gabe hareze temuras oilo temuras shalomim. If somebody is making, he lost his sacrifices and he's replacing them with something else, with another carbon. And he comes along and he says, on this replacement is a temura, a replacement for a shlomim, and it's a replacement for an oilo. The Ka'amar Rabbi Yosi says, Torah Achidi Sahib, you send out this animal until to pasture until it gets a mum, a defect. And then you sell it. Half the money that you get goes for the oila, and half the money goes to the shlomim. Right, chayil shteyem. Since your words were for both, temuras oila, shlomim, they go on both. Hachanami over here too. Mitchila yadata loima areni nazir mina groigris. Right? He meant to say to compare both of them together. The nazir is being compared with its last words. It's all one long thing. I'm taking on the zeros like figs. Now we're on 982. V'hai neder pischoy imoyu. And therefore, this neder has an opening to go to the rabbi to annul it, to be made for nidroi. Why? Because having taken a nazirus with a comparative to figs, which have in actuality nothing to do with nazirus, it means that you had a flawed Kabbalah. You had a flawed acceptance of nazirus. So the door is open. So Beis Hillel therefore says it's not in nazirus. It's not in nazirus. The vow is no good from its beginning, and you can get rid of it immediately. So in other words, Beis Shammai says each words matter. He goes like Rameir, that the first words you said were already Nazir. They were good. You became a Nazir. Your second words of the figs, now that didn't make any sense. So that doesn't count. Beis Hillel says no, like Rabbi Yossi. Beis Hillel says no, all your words count. They're all one. It's not two separate sayings. It's all one saying. You compared your acceptance of Nazirus to figs. Well, Nazirus has nothing to do with figs, and figs have nothing to do with Nazirus. So therefore, the whole thing is nonsensical. The whole thing is nonsensical.
So he's not a Nazir.
And therefore, he's not a Nazir. Why? Because the whole acceptance, the whole Kabbalah's Nazirus was based on a false premise. It was based on a false premise. Zakti Gemara, Ube Shammai Nami, and Beis Shammai too, Neda Pischa Imayu, the vow is together with its opening for release. Beis Shammai says the first words are the first words, Hareini Nazir. The second words are about figs, and figs have nothing to do with Nazirus, and Nazirus have nothing to do with figs, so there's no prohibition against figs. But clearly, when the guy made his Kabbalah, his acceptance of Nazirus, he was combining it with figs. So his whole acceptance was predicated on the figs. So therefore, there's an opening, even according to Beis Shammai, that they're two separate sayings. Nonetheless, the second saying is clearly defining the first saying. And if that's the case, even according to Beis Shammai, the whole thing, what do you call it? The whole thing should be opened to be released. At the very least, you have an opening to go to your Rav and get it annulled, that it never was a Kabbalah's Nazirus at all. And the Gemara says, you're right, that's the most logical thing. So the Gemara says, Ella, Beis Shammai sabi like Rameir. Beis Shammai holds like Rameir. The Omar ein Adam Moitzi double about Torah. That a person does not let words come out of his mouth to what he called for nothing. V'chivon the Omar Hareini Nazir. The moment he says the words Hareini Nazir, Habilei Nazir, right? He's a Nazir. So what are we going to do about the last words? From dried figs or pressed figs, that he said Hareini Nazir, and then his wife walked into the room and said, are you nuts? We have a dinner date tonight. We're going out to eat in a fancy restaurant. They're going to have red wine. So he says, I only made it for figs. What is in essence he's doing? He's saying, I have
regretting what he said.
I'm regretting that I accepted the Nazirus. So now, is it a Nazirus? Is it not a Nazirus? Because right away, what did he do, everybody? Mabish toich kedei dibor. Mabish, in the same sentence, he regretted what he said at the beginning. So on this, Beis Shammai letamayu, Beis Shammai holds like is consistent with his what he holds. Da'amri ein she'elo behegdish. That if you are mekadesh an animal, you go into your pen of animals and you take your best looking cow, your best looking ox, and you mekadesh it, you sanctify it to be a carbon. And then as you're sanctified, you go, am I crazy? Why am I giving the base of me to such an expensive thing? And you turn around and you say, no, forget that. I'm going to be mekadesh. I'm going to be mekadesh this skinny little nothing over here. In other words, you have a Maserati parked in your garage, and you have a Nissan Rogue parked in your garage. And for some strange reason, you say, I'm going to donate the Maserati to the shul. And then you go, what, bin ich Meshiga? No, I meant the Nissan Rogue. Beis Shammai, you are Mekadesh the Maserati, guess what? The Maserati is sanctified, is donated to the shul. Same thing over here. If you have an animal that you were Mekadesh, that you sanctified, even though you want to immediately switch to a different animal, you're stuck. Same thing again. Ein she'ela b'nezirus. There's no petitioning in Nazirus to be annulled. Because in Nazirus, the words of the pasuk are, you can see it in number 15 in the art scroll. Ad Malois hayomim ashiyazir Lashem kodesh yiyu, until the completions of the day that he dedicated to Hashem. Lashem kodesh. That's exactly the same language, like by sanctifying an animal for the Beis Hamikdash. La kodesh Lashem, Lashem kodesh. So Nazirus has the same sanctification process like a carbon. So just like by a carbon, like an animal, if you Mekadesh it, you can't regret it. Regret doesn't work. Same thing by Nazirus, regret doesn't work. Okay, so that's Beis Shammai.
The reason why, when a guy becomes a ger, to become a Jew, he sanctifies himself. He can never regret it and say, I'm
reversing.
Go back.
Right, there is no going back. Exactly, it's the same idea, Daddy. It's literally the same as Hashem. If you make yourself kodesh Lashem, sanctified to God, that's it. You're sanctified. There's no taking, no backsies, no Indian giving. Same thing over here, says Beis Shammai. It's true. He said, Areini Nazir, then his wife looked at him like he's crazy. And then he says, Mina Develos from the figs, right? Mina Groigeris and Mina Develos. Says Beis Shammai, tough noogies. You might have wanted to get out of the Nazirus. It doesn't work. Nazirus is called Lashem Kodesh, to Hashem Kodesh. So Zakti Gemaru, Beis Hillel, Sabi ki Rab Shimon. But like Rab Shimon, Rab Beis Hillel holds like Rab Shimon. It's not, because we learned in the Mishnah. Now, a carbon mincha is a grain sacrifice. You take grains, you take flour,
Wheat.
you take wheat, and you take flour. What you don't take is barley. Barley is only used for the carbon oimer, for the oimer.
And for the site, carbon site.
And the carbon saita. Saita?
Right.
Taita? Saita. Saita. But for the purposes of this Gemara, let's stick to the carbon oimer. The oimer, just to remind everybody, is on the second day of Pesach, where you bring the new grains, the barley, and you offer them up, thereby allowing chodosh. From this point on, you're allowed to eat grains that are new, as opposed to yashan, the old grains. That's with barley, but a carbon mincha.
That great grain.
That what it called carbon mincha is brought with wheat. What happens if a guy went ahead and messed up and said he makes a vow, he makes a neder to bring a nidvas mincha, a donative, a voluntary mincha of barley instead of wheat, which of course is impossible because there is no mincha made out of barley. Okay? So does he have to bring the mincha? Does he have to fulfill his pledge to the shul? Right? Well, let's go learn the Gemara. Right? We're now on this Rab Shimon point. Rab Shimon says you don't have to do anything. Because you didn't donate in the proper way. You messed up. So you're up. So therefore, it's meaningless what you said. It seems like you did mean to make an adava, a donation. Says Rab Shimon, no. We look at the totality of your words. And the totality of your words was I'm donating a mincha from barley. There is no mincha from barley. Since there's no mincha from barley, by definition, there's no mincha, and you made no nidava.
Right.
Amid Bays, Tess Amid Bays, 9b1. Okay, so now Masnisin like the likey Tana. Our Mishnah is not like this Tana. Okay, here we go. It's not the Tanya. Rabbi Nosson, another Rav. Rabbi Nosson said, if somebody says, I am a Nazir from Develos, from figs, Beishamai Oimrim, he has a different saying. Nadir, Fin Nazir. And the Rosh explains you have to write Oi. Beishamai Oimrim Nazir, Noida Vinazir Pirish, Noidar Oi Nazir.
Could be a neder or it could be a nazirus.
Right. Im loy hoya belibi l'nizoyer el shi'alai carbon having nodded. Im loy amaklum having nodded the suburb Rameya because he holds like Rameya, the type is Lashon Rishon. In other words, Masnisin the loy ki Tana. Our mission is not like this Tana. It's not. Rabbi Nosson Oimer. If somebody says I'm a Nazir from figs, Beishamai Oimrim Noider. It's either a neder forbidding him to eat the figs, or not nazir, or it's a nazir. In other words, it's only one or the other. You ask him, and he says, "No, I meant to forbid myself from figs." Then it's a neder. If he says, "No, I just said it," it's a nazirut. It's a nazirus, and it's not a neder. Basil says, Nodur ve'eino nazir. In fact, all it is a neder, forbidding himself to figs, but it's not a nazirus. Why not? Because there's no such thing as a nazirus that has to do with figs.
So it's got to be a neder.
So it's got to be a neder. What do figs have to do with nazirus? What he seems to be saying is, I am forbidding myself to the figs, like a neder.
Because
Like
the word nazir
is a word of the
translated.
Correct.
I'm removing myself from.
Correct. In other words, what are you doing as a nazir? You're forbidding yourself from stuff, from
Right.
great products. In that case, right? In that
Getting
case,
himself from the figs.
right, exactly. So, Zakti Gemara. Okay, so Zakti Gemara. Here we go. Beishamai sabri lo kirameya ukirab Yehuda. Beishamai therefore is holding like Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda, that the words are the first words where you break it into two. All your words have meaning, and therefore, at the very least, one thing is chal. And Basil sabi like Rabbi Yosi, and Basil holds like Rabbi Yosi, that in fact it's all one saying. And if the second half of what you're saying contradicts the first thing that you're saying, the whole thing falls apart, and we're done. Lishna Achrina, Amrele, another version, Rav Nosson Oimer, Beishamai Amrim Nodo Ve'enu Nazir. Beishamai says he has a neder, but he's not a nazir. In fact, the second words come to define. The second words of a figs comes to tell us that I'm forbidden to the figs like a neder, like as if it was a nazirus. Ubeisil Oimrim loy nodo ve'loy nazir. It's nothing, it falls apart. Beishamai ki Rabbi Yehuda. In this case, Beishamai therefore is just like Rabbi Yehuda, where Rabbi Yehuda says something is chal, right? Something is chal. Ubeisil ki Rab Shimon, and Beisil is like Rab Shimon, who says when the second words contradict the first words, nothing is chal. Okay? Now, Tanan Hosam. Ha'omer harei olai mincha. If a person says it's incumbent on me to bring a mincha, lahavi min ha'sa'irim, from barley, this Mishnah says, you're right. There is no such thing as a mincha of minchas are made of wheat. Therefore, Yovi minachitim. Therefore, bring a mincha from wheat. He said sa'irim, but it's clear that he meant to bring a mincha. He messed up on the particulars, on the details, on the small print. This happens all the time. If you're working on a contract, you gotta get a good lawyer that goes through the details, because everything is in the details. So he's saying, this Mishnah says, Yavi min achitim, he should bring the mincha from wheat, because that's what he really meant to do. Kamach, if he says, I'm going to bring the mincha from ordinary flour, Yavi silas, he should bring from fine flour. Shalai b'shem and levainad, if he says, I'm going to bring the mincha correctly, without its additional oil and levainad, frankincense, Yeviena b'shemen ulevaina. He should bring it with oil and frankincense. He says, I'm going to bring it with chatzi isarain. I'm only going to bring it with a half of isarin of flour. Yavi isar shalim. He should bring it with a complete israin. Israin umechza. If he says, I'm going to bring it with an israin and half, Yavi shnayim. He has to bring 2 israin.
Because there's no such a thing as
half, of course. Rab Shimon Paita, Rab Shimon says, like a shita, if something in your words contradict what you said before, make no sense with the beginning of your sentence, the whole thing falls apart. Why? Because we do not donate, he didn't donate in the matter of those who donate. Your words, if your words, it's all of one, it's one saying, we don't split it. In essence, this touches on the idea of palga dibura. A person can split his words. Reb Shimon is saying, no, he doesn't split his words. It's all one and the same. And
either it's said correctly, or it's
no good to begin.
If it's said correctly, then the whole thing is
the whole thing is gone. So Zakti Gemara, Man Tana, who's the Tana? The Chi Ama Harei Alai Mincha Minisairim. That when someone says, I voluntarily bring a mincha from barley, maybe Minachitim has to bring from wheat. That in fact he has to bring a correct mincha, and that it's not nothing. Amachizkiya b'machlaikis shenua be'shamai. It's the machlaikis between Beishamai and Beisil, and it's going according to Beishamai. Lav Amri Beishamai, because didn't Beishamai say in Inzira Mishnah, in our Mishnah, when someone says, Hareini Nazir, ich bin a Nazir, I am a Nazir, from dried figs or pressed figs, have a Nazir, he says he's a Nazir, even though Naziris has nothing to do with figs, and figs have nothing to do with Naziris. Hachanami, when he said, I'm in Nadiv, a mincha, from barley, even though there is no such thing as a mincha of barley, 9b2, hevi minachitin, he brings from the wheat. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, afilu divrei hakol. You could actually say it goes according to everybody, even Basil, who seems to be saying, like Reb Shimon, that if it's an all or nothing, if your end words mess up your first words, contradict your first words, the whole thing falls apart. So how could our Mishnah be like? How can it be like Basil? The Mishnah is speaking where he subsequently said, had I known that you cannot bring a mincha from barley, I would not have vowed by barley, I would have vowed by wheat. Basil accepts this explanation, where such a claim is believable, and that's binding. In our case, it's not believed, because it's not possible that anybody would think that Nazirus has anything to do with figs. Nazirus has nothing to do with figs. It's one thing to mix up wheat and barley. It's another thing entirely to mix up wine, grape products with figs. You're not going to mix that up. So the fact that you said those words, according to Basil, you said the words for figs, is proof positive that all your words are meaningless and the whole thing falls apart. They teach only where a person says from barley, from lentils. Now, lentils don't get compared to wheat. Wheat and barley are always mentioned together. Lentils are not. That, like maisi, like klum, if he says that, then it's nothing. The whole thing falls apart. There's no donation necessary. Mechti, let's see. Chizkiya command mukim loy masnisa. Who's Chizkiya explaining the Mishnah? Beis Shammai, obviously according to Beis Shammai. V'adoshim legabe mincha, but lentils with regard to a mincha offering, are like figs with having to do with Nazir. They're both completely irrelevant. Figs to a Nazir, lentils to a mincha. Uka'abri Beis Shammai having Nazir, and Beis Shammai says the person is still a Nazir. So how could you say that the Mishnah says of lentils is null and void when we see, if you're going to tell me that Mishnah is Beis Shammai, you see them in our Mishnah, Beis Shammai holds, if you make a Nazirus, comparing it to figs, even though they have nothing to do with each other, it's still Chal, the Nazirus takes place. Zakti Gemara, Hadabei Chizkiya. You're right. Chizkiya retracted his view that the Mishnah of the Mishnah in Menachos follows Beis Shammai. He says, no, you're right, it's not Beis Shammai. Why did he reverse? Amar Rabba, the words of the Mishnah were problematic. My area, the Tani Minasairim, why did the Mishnah go and say the case was, I am bringing a mincha from barley, lisnei mino adoshim? It would have been more novel, a bigger chiddush to bring, I am bringing a mincha from lentils. And then if you want to say, even though it's lentils, we have a Mandi Amma that holds that you still have to bring a carbon mincha, now that would be a huge chiddush. And we'd say, well, certainly for lentils, then certainly for barley. The fact that the Mishnah only brought barley, by definition, means barley, yes, because wheat and barley get mixed up. But lentils is no.
Right.
So therefore, it's not a comparison. So Elo Sabach Chizkiya, he come a Beis Shammai Hasam, and now we're on 9b3. Okay, where did Beis Shammai say over there in the Mishnah in Menachos? Here, Rabbi Yehuda, like the version of Rabbi Yehuda. What did Rabbi Yehuda say? If you all remember, that something is chal. That something. When somebody says something, something goes into effect.
It's not a Nazir, it's a neder.
So therefore, if it's not a Nazir, it's a neder. If it's a neder, it's not a Nazir, but something goes into effect. So in Menachos, guess what? You have a mincha, bring the mincha, and by our case, it's one or the other. You'll either be a Nazir, or you'll be forbidden from figs. Zakti Gemara, v'Rab Yochanan Amar, afilu minhu adoshim. Even if he says a mincha from lentils, he has to bring a mincha of wheat. Rabbi Yochanan Udama, but Rabbi Yochanan was the one who said, he's the one who said that if a person says, if I had known that you cannot bring a mincha from barley, I wouldn't have vowed in barley. I would have only vowed for wheat. So he only accepted this where this is credible. But everybody knows, there's no such thing as a mincha of lentils. It's one thing to make a mistake and switch barley with wheat, because when wheat and barley go together, lentils Lentils is beans. It's got nothing to do. So everybody knows that minchas the same way.
Not only that, but there are two menuchas that you bring with barley. That's why you made a mistake.
Exactly. My father's saying there are the carbon, the minchas oimer, the mincha of the oimer of the pechadash, and the minchas saita when there's a suspected adulterer, right? In both those cases, it comes from barley. So you could see, and people talk that way. Even today, we say wheat and oats, wheat and barley, right? No one says lentils. So everybody knows minchas have nothing to do with lentils. So it should be nothing. It should fall apart. So the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan says even by lentils you have to bring a mincha. Why? The Devar of the Chizkiyahu Kama. He's saying according to Chizkiyahu's approach. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. In other words, he's explaining Chizkiyahu. Rabbi Yochanan agrees that if you say from lentils, it clearly has nothing to do with minchas. And therefore you don't have to bring, it's like klum, it's nothing. You get, you're off the hook. But according to Chizkiyahu, Atman Tamah Kamahadabe. Why did you, Chizkiyahu, retract your contention that the Tanakama holds like Reish Shammai, Mishum Deloy Ketani Min Adoshim? Because the case in Menachos was a case of where you voluntarily are bringing a mincha from barley. And we said the bigger chiddush would be to say I'm voluntarily bringing a mincha from lentils, because lentils are a bigger novelty. If that's allowed, then certainly barley's allowed. But the fact that the case was only from barley, it's proof barley, yes, because it could be mistaken with wheat. But lentils, no. But maybe the Mishnah is working with what's known as the loimi bayikama. It's an editing thing. There's no need to state. Loimi bayikama miadoshim. There's no reason to say that when he says from lentils, the maisi mincha malya, so that he has to bring a proper mincha. The ikalamema, because it's possible to say mahadud mahadide. What he was really doing was rescinding. He said, I am voluntarily bring a mincha. And his wife stuck her head out the door and said, what are you talking about? That's the last bit of flour that we have in the pantry. What are you donating stuff that we don't have? So he turns around, he says, from what do you call, from barley, from lentils. Nonetheless, v'toifis lashon rishon. But his change of heart is ignored because we hold Kaifis Lashon Rishon. We hold on to the first expression of intent. When you said, I am being minadev, I am donating a mincha, stop. That's it. You now are required to bring your mincha. Whatever you say afterwards is meaningless. Kaifis Lashon Rishon. So therefore, the ruling would not be so novel. It's not such a big chiddush if you say from lentils. Because lentils clearly have nothing to do with the mincha, so they must have been said because you have regret that you made this donation. You pledged this donation. And we say, tough noogies, typhus lashon rishon. The first words out of your mouth that you pledged this donation of a mincha requires you now to bring to fulfill your pledge.
Right.
But if he says from barley, this is what he's saying. If it becomes endowed with the kedusha, like the mincha of the omer, again, the omer is brought on the second day of Pesach with barley, the new barley, which now allows us to eat from chadash, from the new grains. We're now on tomorrow's daf, heading to the Mishnah, which is right here on the second line. 10a1. Oy mincha saita, or the mincha of a saita. And both of them are brought from barley. Both of them are brought from barley. Taktish, it would be consecrated, the vow would take effect. Eloi, but but if not, it should not be consecrated. In other words, if we were to interpret his declaration, he would not be obligated to bring a mincha. Kamash malon demaisi minachitim. That yes, he does have to bring a mincha from wheat. In other words, the Tana is telling us that barley is the most novel than lentils. Lentils, everybody knows, have nothing to do with the mincha. So it's clear that what did he have in mind? What did he have in mind, everybody? He had in mind to regret what he just said. He said, I am donating a mincha, and his wife stuck her head out the door and said, we're out of wheat. You're using up all our wheat in the, in the shed, and all our flour in the pantry. So he quickly doesn't want to get into a fight with his wife and says, oh, from lentils. And we say, sorry, typhus lashon rishon. The first words you said are paramount. You said you wanted to donate, you're donating. When he says, I am bringing a mincha from barley, that possibly means he wants to be sanctified like the omer, like the minchas omer, which is brought from barley, or the minchas saita, which is brought from barley. So there's an out over here. He said, listen, that's what I meant. I meant omer and saita, which have nothing to do with me. I personally can't bring the omer, and there's no saita here. So really, I'm
the omer is a korban sibur.
Right, as my father, the omer is a korban sibur for the congregation. It's not a personal omer, and a korban saita is only with his an unseen adulterer. Otherwise, there is no chiyuv. So therefore, there should be no chiyuv for me to actually bring a donative mincha, and I don't have to get into a fight with my wife. Says the Gemara, yes, you do. Very good, everybody. We got through.